music only lasts for so long, so might as well dance while you still can.
When my sister passed away, I inherited the box of Christmas decorations she kept under her bed. She never had much space. She was a widow that lived alone in a small apartment, so everything important to her fit into that one box. At the bottom was a snow globe I didn't recognize. Inside it was a small house with warm yellow lights glowing through the windows. When I shook it, the snow fell slowly and gently, not like the cheap ones that clump and rush. I assumed it was something she'd bought recently. That Christmas, I placed it on the mantle. It felt right there, among the other decorations. Late one night, I was sitting alone in the living room, lights off except for the tree, when I noticed the snow globe was moving. I don't mean it was shaking. The snow inside was falling. Slowly, peacefully. I hadn't touched it. There was no way this could have happened. I watched it until the snow settled again. A few minutes later, it started falling once more. I picked it up, half expecting to feel it warm or vibrate or do something strange. But it was normal. Cold glass, solid base. I set it down and whispered, "Are you okay?" I don't know why I said that. It just came out. The snow stopped. I sat there, tears welling up in my eyes and running down my face. Not because I was scared, but because for the first time since she passed, I felt like she was somewhere. Not gone, just quiet. After Christmas, I packed the decorations away. The snow globe never moved again. But every year when I take it out and place it on the mantle, I feel that same calm settle over the room, like someone familiar has come home and doesn't need to announce themselves.
Quick heads up, this next story involves serious illness and talk of giving up. Please skip ahead if that's not for you tonight. Among night shift nurses in Tochigi Prefecture, there's a rumor about a hospital rooftop that stays open to all, and patients who come back against the odds. New staff get told this story. You're about to hear it. This is survival rate. Stage 4. The 5-year survival rate is about 5%. The doctor informed me of that in a dry, businesslike tone. It was the spring of the year I turned 42. Using being busy as an excuse, I dawdled and skipped my health checkups for years. Then last winter, my boss finally scolded me, and I went reluctantly to be examined. Abnormalities were found. I was sent back for further tests. After a whole series of detailed examinations, what was waiting for me was an utterly unexpected diagnosis: bile duct cancer, and that hollow little number, 5%. Why me? Work was going well, family was going well. I mean, it's odd to say it myself, but I treated other people kindly, and I quit smoking as soon as our first child was on the way. So what exactly did I do? How does it make sense that the probability I'll still be alive in 5 years is only 5%? Anger, sorrow, resentment, every negative feeling you can imagine in this world rose in me incessantly, one after another, from the moment I woke up to the moment I lay down at night. On a friend's recommendation, I transferred to a hospital rumored to have a high cure rate for cancer. Even after the transfer, when family and colleagues came to visit, I put on my bravest artificial smile and tried not to show any weaknesses. That act became stress of its own, and before long, I found myself seriously considering ending my life. Thinking about it now, People are a deeply strange species. Even though I did nothing, there was a 95% chance I would die in 5 years, the moment death came close enough to touch, so I started to pull it closer, with my own hands, searching for a way to take my life. Perhaps I really was cornered badly at that time, because I was trapped in thoughts like that. Of course I was unmotivated about treatment. Maybe it was the mental strain, but the medicine hardly seemed to work at all. Each day I could feel the illness swallowing me, a little at a time. Then one day I finally went up to the hospital roof, looking for a place to die. If I'm gonna die anyway, I thought, and for the first time in 10 years, ever since my wife became pregnant with our eldest son, I drew cigarette smoke slowly, deeply, into my lungs. As I did, memories came back, exactly like a revolving lantern. How desperately I'd quit for the sake of our child. How later, a daughter was born. The entrance ceremony, the kindergarten recital, those little scenes. And the tears came on their own. When I finish this, I'll go. Just then, while I was sunk in what I assumed to be the final sentimentality of my life, a child appeared from who knows where, and suddenly spoke to me from directly behind. "Mister, are you gonna die?" I was so startled I nearly lost all strength. The girl was about the same height as my eldest, so probably in the 4th or 5th year of primary school. She was wearing pajamas, so I assumed that she must be an inpatient here. "You shouldn't be up here. It's not a safe place for kids. Back to your room now." "Mister, are you ill? Is it cancer?" She kept firing off these blunt questions, almost as if she found it fun, and I even began to feel a little angry. "Are you crying, mister? Even though you're a grown-up?" "Huh. I didn't cry. Not even at the very end. If I cried, it would only make everyone around me sad, right? So I held it in." The words "at the very end" snagged on something in me, but I told myself it was just how children speak and to let it pass. "Why are you crying, mister? For your wife? For your kids?" "For all of it." "No, I don't think so. It's for you, isn't it? You just feel sorry for yourself. Your wife and your kids, none of them want you to cry, do they? If you cry, it makes them even sadder. So if you die up here, I think they'll be more sad than now. Much more." Her words stabbed into a place deep in my chest I'd never managed to reach by myself. "And since you work so hard to quit, you probably shouldn't smoke anymore either." She said that, and she went back through the door leading downstairs. She's right. Being lectured by a child like that, what am I doing? Ashamed to the core of how self-centered my thinking had become, I threw the cigarette pack and the lighter straight into the bin. I returned to my room. While tearing up the will I hidden under my pillow, a cool thought crept in. How did that girl know I had quit smoking years ago? After a while, the head nurse came round on her temperature checks. I couldn't get the girl out of my mind, so I asked the head nurse in a casual, offhand way. Head nurse, this short-haired girl, about 4th year of primary school, in pink pajamas with a floral pattern. What illness does she have?" I immediately regretted asking something so foolish. That sort of thing is personal information. There's no way she'd tell me. But the head nurse began to speak about the girl, as if it was the most ordinary topic. "Oh, so you met Saori-chan." Saori-chan was hospitalized here more than 20 years ago. She was such a strong child, and it must have hurt terribly. Progressive pediatric cancer. But she used to say that if she cried, she'd lose. Even with drugs so harsh they'd make an adult give up, she kept at it and kept at it right to the very end. She didn't complain once. At that phrase, "to the very end," it wasn't hard to imagine what happened to that child. While she was in the hospital, Saori-chan would often slip past the nurses and go up to the roof to look at the sky, the clouds, the stars. At the time, for safety management, the hospital had considered locking and closing the rooftop, but because of Saori-chan, they simply couldn't bring themselves to do it. What surprised me most wasn't the content of what she said. It was how the head nurse had talked about the connection between me and a girl who had died in the hospital 20 years earlier, as though it were a familiar, everyday sort of occurrence. After that, I abandoned those weak thoughts and became more proactive about treatment. As a result, I made a recovery so remarkable, it even surprised the doctors, and a few months later I was officially discharged. If I had stayed there, trapped in that dark frame of mind, I'm sure the version of me that exists now would not be here. When I think about it, a hospital where the roof is freely accessible is quite rare, and yet there haven't been any cases of someone jumping from the roof, nothing like that at all. And the so-called survival rate here is said to be overwhelmingly higher than in other hospitals. Maybe, just maybe, the Saori-chan I met on the roof that day after she passed away became an angel. And even now, on that same rooftop, she continues to encourage patients who feel like their illnesses are about to beat them to reconsider doing something irreversible. Thank you, Saori-chan, for teaching me not to give up and giving me my life back.
I used to work closing shifts at a small grocery store when I was 19. The kind of place that smells like cardboard and disinfectant after hours, where the fluorescent lights make everything look a little sick. I didn't have a car back then, so I took the last bus home every night. Same route, same stops, same half-asleep faces. The driver was an older man with a grey mustache who never spoke much, but he always nodded when I got on. One night, it was raining hard enough that it sounded like static on the windows. I got on at the usual stop, paid, and went to sit near the back. The bus was almost empty. 2 stops later, a woman got on. She was young, early 20s maybe, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to her cheeks. She didn't have a bag, no umbrella, nothing. She paid with shaking hands and sat down a few rows ahead of me. Something about her felt quiet, in a way I can't explain. Not shy, not sad, just muted, like she wasn't fully in the room. I watched the rain run down the glass and tried not to stare. At the next stop, she stood up. The bus hadn't even fully stopped before she walked forward and leaned close to the driver. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw the driver's face change. Just a flicker, like he'd been punched in the chest. He nodded slowly. The woman got off into the rain. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. And the driver drove in silence for 2 full stops before he spoke. Quietly. Like he wasn't talking to me so much as to himself. She rides sometimes. I didn't answer at first because I wasn't sure he meant me. She used to, he corrected. Before. I sat forward a little. Do you know her? He kept his eyes on the road. Her mum used to wait at the corner by the bakery, every night, even after... His voice caught. He cleared his throat. I told her to stop coming out in the cold. She said, if I'm not there, she'll think I gave up. The driver swallowed hard, like the next part hurt to say. Tonight was the first time she asked me to tell her mum something. I felt my stomach drop. What did she say? He blinked fast, then stared through the windshield, as if the road had turned blurry. She said, tell Mum I'm warm now. Tell her she can go home. I didn't sleep much that night. The next evening, when the bus passed the bakery corner, there was an older woman standing there in a raincoat, just like always. She lifted her hand in a small wave. Habit more than hope. The driver slowed. He opened the doors, even though it wasn't an official stop. He said something to her I couldn't hear, and the older woman's face crumpled so suddenly, so painfully that I had to look away. She covered her mouth with both hands, like she was trying to keep the sound inside her. Then she nodded, over and over, like the only way she could stay upright was by agreeing with whatever he'd said. She didn't come back after that. But on nights when the rain is heavy and the bus is quiet, I still think about the idea that love can be so stubborn. It keeps you standing on a street corner for years. And that sometimes, maybe, it gets answered.
After my grandmother passed away, my family kept the house exactly the same for months. No one said it out loud, but it felt like moving anything would make her absence real. Every afternoon, she used to sit in a wooden chair by the window and watch people pass on the street. She didn't always talk. Sometimes she'd just sit there, hands folded, like she was listening to something only she could hear. A few weeks after the funeral, I came home early from work and noticed the chair had been pulled slightly from the table. I assumed my mum had been sitting there, but the house was empty. That night, as I was washing dishes, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Just a shift of shadow near the window. When I turned, the chair was back where it used to be, angled toward the glass. I stood there for a long time, not scared, just aware. This happened several more times over the next few weeks. The chair would move only when the house was quiet, always ending up facing the window, never anywhere else. Eventually, my mum noticed too. She sighed, touched the back of the chair, and said softly, "She's not ready to stop watching yet." After that, the chair never moved again. We still keep it there.
My grandfather passed away in early winter, just as the weather started to turn properly cold. He was the kind of man who wore the same thick wool sweater every day, even indoors, even when everyone else complained it was too warm. After the funeral, my grandmother couldn't bring herself to move his things. His sweater stayed draped over the back of the dining chair where he always left it. No one mentioned it. We just walked around it. One night I stayed over to keep her company. The house felt bigger than it used to, like the walls had quietly stepped back. We watched television together until she fell asleep in her chair. I tucked a blanket around her and went to bed. Sometime in the night I woke up because I thought I heard movement downstairs. Not footsteps, like the soft scrape of a chair on the floor. I lay there, listening, my heart beating too fast for a house I'd known my whole life. Then I smelled something. That faint, familiar scent of Grandpa's aftershave. I went downstairs, slowly, telling myself it was just my imagination. The living room was dark except for a small lamp left on near the couch. The dining chair was pulled out, and the sweater was folded, neatly, carefully, sleeves tucked in, just the way my grandfather used to do before sitting down. I stood there for a long time, not afraid, just overwhelmed, like someone had quietly finished a habit they weren't ready to give up yet. The next morning my grandmother noticed it right away. "Oh," she said softly, touching the sweater. He always hated leaving it messy. She smiled, just a little. We folded it together and put it away after that. But sometimes, late at night, I can still catch that same faint scent in the house. And for a moment, it feels like he's just stepped out of the room.
I lost my cat suddenly. One day she was there, the next she wasn't. I took it harder than I expected to. For weeks after, I felt her jump onto my bed at night. The mattress would dip. I'd feel the familiar weight curled up behind my knees. I told myself it was muscle memory, nothing but grief or wishful thinking. But then one morning I woke up to find a small tuft of her hair on my pillow. I hadn't kept anything with fur on it. It hurt too much. The feeling stopped after a while, and so did the fur.
My Thomas wasn't always stubborn, but he refused to leave his old armchair, and it broke my heart twice. My name is Eleanor. I'm 73 years old, and I spent 50 wonderful years married to my Thomas. He passed away 9 months ago from a sudden heart attack. It was devastating, of course, but he went peacefully at home, right in his favorite chair, by the large bay window in the den. I found comfort in that he was comfortable in his last moments. After the funeral, I tried to keep busy. I kept the house exactly as he left it. I felt close to him when I was in the den, knitting in my chair while his empty armchair sat beside me. It was hard, but I was managing, still do. Thomas had 2 defining habits that tied him to that chair: his constant reading of old leather-bound adventure books, and his pipe. He was never without it. He smoked a specific kind of aromatic tobacco, a blend of cherry and vanilla, and the scent was a permanent, comforting fixture in our home. When he died, I cleaned his pipe, wrapped his last pouch of tobacco in plastic, and tucked them away in the attic. I wanted to clear the air for my own sake, though I secretly missed the smell terribly. About a month after he had passed, I was sitting alone in the den, staring out the window, when I caught a quick, faint whiff of pipe smoke. It wasn't overwhelming, it was subtle, like someone had just passed by the open door after finishing a smoke. I immediately started looking for a rational cause. Did a neighbor light one up? Was I imagining it? The scent lingered for maybe 30 seconds, right near his empty chair, and then dissipated. I dismissed it, a draft carrying an outside scent, trick of memory and grief. But it kept happening, always in the late afternoon, always between 4 and 5 p.m., precisely when Thomas used to settle in for his evening smoke, and it was always strongest near his chair. It was comforting at first. It felt like Thomas was still around, just settling in for the evening. I would talk to the empty chair. "Hello, love. Did you enjoy your book today?" But the manifestation started to get stronger and less comforting. The scent went from a faint whiff to a distinct, fresh smell of burning tobacco. Not a stale, lingering scent, but the smell of a newly lit pipe. I'd sometimes walk into the den, and the room would be thick with the smell, and the air perfectly still. It felt impossible. The smell with no source. The physical activity started 2 months ago. It wasn't violent like those poltergeist stories you hear. It was domestic and specific to Thomas. He was obsessive about his reading. He always used the same leather bookmark and left his book resting face down on the arm of his chair. After he passed, I put all of his books away on the shelf. One morning, I walked into the den, and a book, a thick copy, was sitting on the seat of his chair. It was open, face down, with his exact worn leather bookmark sitting right at page 142. It must have been just as he'd left it. I placed it back on the shelf. The next day, it was out again. I started to wonder if he was trying to get my attention. Maybe he was stuck to the comfort of that routine, and he was using the only way that he could, smell and simple object placement, to show me that he was still there. It broke my heart, because I realized that my refusal to move his chair, my desire to keep things exactly as they were, might be preventing Thomas from moving on. I haven't sold the house, but I did finally move the armchair. I put it in a different room with a different blanket, but tucked into a drawer in a side table is his pipe and tobacco. Since then, since I moved everything, the smell has stopped completely. The books stay on the shelf. I guess I feel sad now, but I also feel a little peace. I hope I gave him the permission he needed to find his rest till we meet again. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, letting him go that second time. But I think it's healthy. At least I hope so.
My grandmother had a Christmas tree full of ornaments that made no sense unless you knew the family history. Little handmade ones with misspelled names, faded photos inside glass. One that was literally a bottle cap wrapped in tinsel. After she passed, my mum gave me a shoebox and said, "These were yours." Inside was one ornament I didn't remember at all. It was a small wooden star, cheap, painted white, with my name written on the back in neat handwriting. But the handwriting wasn't my grandmother's. It was my brother's. My brother passed away before I was born. We didn't talk about him much, not because it was forbidden, but because it hurt in a quiet way, like a bruise no one wanted to press. I sat on the floor holding the star and asked my mum how that was possible. She stared at it for a long time before she said, "He used to make ornaments in the hospital. They had craft time. He told us he was making one for you." I laughed, awkwardly, but I didn't exist. Mum's eyes went glossy. "He said you would." That night, I put the star on my tree anyway. I didn't know what else to do with it. It felt wrong to keep it in a box like a secret. At around 2 a.m., I woke up because I thought I heard someone in my living room. I lay still and listened. Nothing. Just the hum of the heater and the faint tick of the kitchen clock. Then, very softly, I heard the sound of something wooden tapping glass. Tap, tap, tap. I walked out barefoot, heart pounding in that stupid way it does when you know you're being irrational but can't stop. The tree lights were on. I swear I'd turned them off before bed. The wooden star was moving. Not swinging like it had been bumped. Not spinning from airflow. It was gently tapping against the glass ornament beside it. Like someone was testing if it could make noise without being obvious. I stood there, frozen, and whispered, "Is that you?" The tapping stopped. The star turned, just slightly, so the back faced me. My name. I started crying before I even understood why. The next morning, the tree lights were off. The star hung perfectly still like it always had. I don't tell many people this story because it sounds like grief doing what grief does, finding patterns where it wants comfort. But here's the thing. I wasn't grieving him. I never met him. And yet somehow, for a few seconds in my living room, it felt like someone I'd missed my whole life was saying, I kept my promise.
I've been staying in my grandmother's house for 2 months now while I sort through her estate. And I'm starting to think she never really left. I know how that sounds, but I need to tell someone about what's been happening, because it's getting harder to dismiss as coincidence. Grandma Ruth passed away in her sleep 3 months ago at age 87. She'd lived in this house for over 40 years, ever since my grandfather died. The family asked me to stay here while we figure out what to do with the property, partly because I'm between jobs right now, and partly because someone needs to maintain the place. I was close to Grandma growing up, spent summers here as a kid, so it felt natural to help out. The first thing I noticed was the coffee pot. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m. it turns on by itself. It's not the automatic timer, I checked, and it's not set. The machine is probably 15 years old. One of those basic models with just an on-off switch. But every single morning, I wake up to the sound of coffee brewing. 6 o'clock was when Grandma always started her day. She'd make coffee, sit at the kitchen table with her crossword puzzle, and plan out her morning. I thought maybe there was an electrical issue, so I unplugged the coffee pot completely. The next morning at 6, I heard the familiar gurgling sound. When I got to the kitchen, the pot was plugged back in and brewing a fresh pot. The cord had been neatly coiled the way Grandma always did it, wrapped just so and tucked behind the machine. Then there's the radio. Grandma had this old AM/FM radio on the kitchen windowsill that she listened to religiously. She'd turn on the news at 7 a.m., classical music at 10 for her morning cleaning, and talk radio at 2 p.m. while she did her afternoon baking. The radio has been doing exactly that schedule since I've been here, turning on and off at those precise times, always tuned to her favorite stations. The kitchen utensils keep rearranging themselves too. I'll put the wooden spoons in one drawer, the measuring cups in another, organizing things the way that makes sense to me. But the next morning, everything is back to Grandma's system. Spoons in the crock by the stove, measuring cups nested in the cabinet above the sink, exactly where she kept them for decades. At first, I convinced myself I was doing it unconsciously, muscle memory from all those childhood summers helping her cook. But I started paying closer attention, and I know I'm not moving these things. I'll deliberately put the spatula in the wrong drawer before bed, and by morning it's back in its proper spot next to the stove. The emotional part is harder to explain. Sometimes I'll be sitting in her favorite chair going through old photos or paperwork, and I'll suddenly feel this overwhelming sense of being loved and protected. It's the exact feeling I used to get as a kid when Grandma would hug me after a bad dream. Warm and safe and completely understood. The feeling is so strong it brings tears to my eyes. I've started smelling her perfume too. White shoulders, the same scent she wore for as long as I can remember. It happens at random moments, usually when I'm feeling overwhelmed by all the estate work, or missing her particularly badly. The scent will just appear, faint but unmistakable, like she's standing right next to me offering comfort. Last week I smelled something even more specific. Her snickerdoodles baking. Grandma made the best snickerdoodles, and the smell was so vivid I actually went to check the oven, thinking maybe I'd somehow turned it on by accident. The kitchen was empty, of course, but the cinnamon sugar scent lingered for almost an hour. 3 days ago I saw her. I was coming down the hallway from the bathroom, and I caught a glimpse of someone in a blue house dress walking from the kitchen toward the living room. Just a split second in my peripheral vision, but I knew instantly it was Grandma. She moved the way she always did, that slight shuffle from her arthritis, her hand trailing along the wall for balance. By the time I turned my head fully, she was gone. I should probably be scared, but I'm not. Everything that's happening feels like Grandma's taking care of me the way she always did. Making sure I have coffee in the morning, keeping her kitchen organized the right way, letting me know she's still here when I need her most. The house feels alive with her presence, like it's continuing the rhythm of her daily life, whether she's physically here or not. 40 years of the same routine, the same love poured into these rooms. Maybe that kind of devotion leaves an imprint that doesn't just disappear when someone passes away. I'm supposed to be preparing the house for sale, but I'm finding it harder and harder to imagine letting it go. How do you sell a place where someone's spirit still lives so completely? How do you disrupt a routine that's been running smoothly for decades, even after death? My family thinks I'm just processing grief in an unusual way, and maybe they're right. But I know what I'm experiencing, and it feels like the most natural thing in the world. Grandma spent her whole life taking care of this house and everyone in it. Why would death change that?
I work in aged care. I have for about 10 years now. People love to ask if where I work is haunted, like they want a fun story with a spooky ending. But I'll tell you right now, it's not fun. It's mostly just heavy, quiet, sometimes beautiful, sometimes heartbreaking. A few years ago, we had a resident named Mabel who was fading fast. She wasn't in pain, but her body was just finishing. Her family visited when they could, but she didn't have many. The night she passed, I was on shift with another nurse, and we both felt it before anyone told us. It sounds strange, but the air changed. The hallway outside her room got cold. Not the heater is broken cold. Cold, like stepping into a shadow. We went into her room and found her peaceful, mouth slightly open, like she had exhaled and decided not to inhale again. We did what we had to do. Paperwork, calls, cleaning, quiet voices. Then, just as we finished, the call bell went off from Mabel's room. We looked at each other, half annoyed, half tired. Call bells malfunction all the time. I walked in, expecting to find the cord stuck or the button wedged under a pillow. Nothing. Mabel's bed was still. The cord was hanging free. The call bell stopped. I stepped back out. 10 minutes later, it happened again. Same room, same bell. This time my co-worker came with me. We stood in the doorway together, staring at the bed, and then we heard it. A soft humming. Not from a radio, not from a phone. A human humming, low and gentle, like someone soothing a child. It seemed to come from a far corner of the room, near the old armchair where Mabel liked to sit. My co-worker whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded. The humming continued for maybe 20 seconds, then stopped. The temperature in the room lifted, like warmth returning to a space that had been held open for something. The call bell never went off again. The next week, one of the cleaners asked me why a nurse had been sitting with Mabel after she passed. I told her no one had. The cleaner frowned. I saw her, in uniform, in the chair, just sitting there, like she didn't want the old lady to be alone. We used to have a nurse here who died suddenly, heart attack, years ago. Everyone remembered her because she always hummed while she worked. I don't know if it was her, but I do know this. After that night, it felt like Mabel didn't leave alone. And for once, that thought didn't scare me at all.
My father was never really a believer in anything supernatural or paranormal. He only believed in what he could see and what he could touch. But that all changed after my mother died. One evening, I came home to find him sitting alone inside the living room. The lights were off. He was staring at nothing. He looked smaller than I remembered. "I felt her," he said, without even looking at me. I thought he meant emotionally or something. "She put a hand on my shoulder," he continued. "Just for a second, like she used to when she passed behind me." I didn't say anything. I didn't want to break the moment. After that, he started talking to the empty house when he thought nobody was listening. Not begging, not crying, just kind of talking. He seemed to be a lot calmer too. One night, he told me, "She doesn't stay long, just long enough to let me breathe." Again, he never claimed to see her, but he stopped looking so alone and depressed after this. So, whatever he felt and saw, it must have helped.
I work as a ski and snowboard instructor at a major resort in the Rockies. I know my mountain better than I know my apartment. I'm a pretty rational guy, and if you told me this story, I would assume hypothermia and lack of oxygen. But I was lucid. I was freezing, and I owe my life to something that shouldn't exist. This happened a few winters ago, late season. I was doing a final sweep of the upper bowls after the lifts closed, just checking boundary markers before heading back down. The forecast was wrong, completely wrong. At 5:30 p.m., a whiteout hit the summit like a physical wall. One minute I had 50 feet of visibility, the next it was 0. You know that silence in a massive blizzard? It's not quiet, it's kind of terrifyingly silent, like cotton wool stuffed into your ears. I couldn't even hear the wind. I only felt it whipping my face. I was instantly and completely disoriented. I couldn't tell up from down or the fall line from the boundary rope. I knew I was sliding off towards a section that we call the scree gap, a steep, jagged drop-off that would be fatal in the dark. My phone was useless, buried under layers, likely with no service. Panic is a luxury you can't afford up there, but I was seconds away from it. I had maybe 2 hours before the cold would take me. I stopped dead, leaning on my poles, trying to find any visual cue. And then about 50 feet away, through the dense, whipping snow, a light appeared. It wasn't a beam. It didn't look like a headlamp or the reflection of a snowmobile. It was a perfect sphere of intense, soft yellow-white glow, about the size of a baseball. It didn't appear to have a power source or structure. No lens. It was just pure floating light. This light seemed to ignore the blizzard. It didn't cast shadows, and the snow around it just vanished from view, leaving a perfectly defined area of light that seemed completely immune to the conditions. I knew every piece of rescue gear on that mountain. Nothing can do that. It began to move slowly and deliberately, holding a consistent distance from me. Just fast enough to force me to follow, but slow enough that I wouldn't lose it. Every fiber of my mind was screaming, "Get a grip. Run the other way. This light's probably not even real." But I was freezing, lost, completely out of options. The light was the only thing giving the world any shape. I pushed off my thoughts, relying entirely on the impossible glow in front of me. For what felt like an hour but was probably less, I followed that silent, unwavering sphere. It led me through terrain that I recognized later was the absolute edge of the scree gap. Past rock formations that I should have hit my head on, over terrain that was completely unskiable under normal circumstances. It wasn't really navigating me. It was simply defining the safe path, moment by moment. It never paused. It was relentless. Inside, I was screaming, trying to rationalize it as a weird atmospheric reflection, but the light was too perfect. It was leading me somewhere. Finally, the light moved ahead, slower now. It stopped, hovered just above the roof line of a small wooden structure. I recognized it instantly, an old emergency shelter on the lower slope. It was a place that I never would have navigated to in the whiteout. I skied the final few feet, exhausted. I stopped right at the shelter door. I looked up to thank whatever strange angel or demonic lure this was. As my hand reached for the rough wooden latch of the shelter, the light completely contracted in itself, like I was watching a star shrink, and then it completely vanished. No sound, no lingering flash, just immediate darkness, and the brutal muffling noise of the whiteout, rushing back in, swallowing the space where the light had been. I basically spent the night shivering in the shelter, but I survived. I know that I was rescued, but it wasn't by a person or a machine. It was by some sort of light. I know it sounds crazy, but it's real. That light cut through the worst cold that the mountain could offer, and it left the second I was safe. I've been back on the mountain hundreds of times. I never saw anything like it again. But I've always been curious if anyone else has seen something like it.
After my wife passed, the house became unbearable at night. During the day I could keep busy. I cleaned, I cooked meals I barely touched. I watched television just for the noise. But once the sun went down and the rooms went dark, the silence pressed in on me from every direction. Every creak sounded too loud. Every shadow felt too empty. I stopped sleeping in our bedroom after the funeral. I couldn't stand the sight of her side of the bed, still neatly made and untouched. Instead, I slept on the couch, with the lamp on and the television murmuring softly, until I drifted off. That's when I started hearing footsteps. The first night I thought I was dreaming, light, careful steps moving slowly down the hallway towards the living room. Never rushed or heavy, but somehow familiar. I sat up, heart pounding, staring at the dark doorway, but nothing came through. I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses make noise. And the next night it happened again. Same time, same sound. A pause at the doorway, like someone was standing there deciding whether to come in. Then the feeling. I can't explain it properly, but it felt like someone checking on me, watching, not in a frightening way, but gently, the way you watch someone you love when they're asleep. I whispered her name without thinking. The footsteps retreated. I didn't sleep much after that. Over the next few weeks, it became routine. Every night, sometime after midnight, the footsteps would come down the hall. They never crossed into the room. They never spoke. They just stopped at the doorway, stayed for a minute or two, and then slowly walked away. I stopped being afraid, and I started looking forward to it. It felt comforting, like I wasn't completely alone in the house anymore. One night after a particularly rough day, I broke down. I cried harder than I had since the funeral, curled up on the couch, barely able to breathe. My chest hurt. My head ached. I remembered saying out loud through tears, "I don't know how to do this without you." That was the first night the footsteps came closer. I felt the couch dip slightly, just enough to notice, a familiar weight settling beside me, and the air felt warmer. I didn't dare move. I didn't need to see her. I knew. From that night on, it changed. Sometimes I'd feel the couch shift. Sometimes I'd hear the faintest sound like fabric moving, or the whisper of breath that wasn't my own. Once I felt a hand rest briefly on my arm, reassuring, and gone before I could react. I started sleeping again. Months passed, then a year. The visits became less frequent, not gone, just softer, like she was letting go. The last night I felt her, I had just finished packing up some of her old things, not all of them, but just enough to make the house feel like mine again. I sat on the couch exhausted and said to myself, "I think I'll be okay." The footsteps came one final time. They stopped at the doorway, and then they walked away down the hall, slower than ever. I never heard them again. The house is quiet now, truly quiet, but it doesn't feel empty anymore. Sometimes when I lie down at night, I still feel calm wash over me, like I'm being watched over from somewhere just out of sight, and I sleep.
I moved to the quiet Devon village of Branford Spoke almost 20 years ago, seeing the slow rhythm of country life. Our lane was edged with fields of cows and wildflower hedges, and the only sounds at dusk were church bells and the winded oak trees. I never imagined how this peaceful place could have such sorrow and solace. My neighbor, an elderly widower named Henry Thompson, had lived alone ever since his wife Eliza passed. When I first met him, he was a silent figure sitting on the garden bench, watching the last light fade over the hedgerows. It was clear he was still grieving, even years later. In the early evenings after work, I would stop by his cottage on the way home, and we'd share a pot of tea. He was a large man with a gentle voice and a warm smile that showed he cared. Henry would talk about his days quietly and listen intently to me. He'd often ask about my family and grandchildren, and I teased that he should have his own by now. As the seasons passed, he told me stories of Eliza with the fondest recollections. She had been a school teacher with kind brown eyes and a laugh that would fill the room. I could see how deeply he missed her. He sometimes smiled through tears when he spoke of her. One afternoon, as rain pattered on the roof, Henry admitted softly, "It's like hearing Eliza in the kitchen after she's gone. I keep waiting for her to call me for supper." He would always laugh softly at himself, patting the empty seat beside him. I grew to consider Henry a friend. When he started calling me by my first name, Sam, I knew how much comfort those visits gave him. 2 years after his wife's passing, Henry quietly told me he had visited the local animal shelter. There, among many hopeful faces, was a golden retriever puppy with soft eyes who immediately crawled onto his lap. He named her Freya on the spot. From that day, Freya became the spark that lit up Henry's world. Freya had a thick golden coat and boundless energy. She knew the roads and lanes of Branford spoke like the back of her paw. Children in the village would wave at them as they passed on their walks, and the local postman always paused to say hello. Henry would grin proudly, saying, "She's my guardian, you see." And indeed, she protected him with her loyalty, nudging his arm if he looked troubled. I watched Henry's world brighten the day Freya arrived. In the mornings he would make tea. Freya would stand expectantly by his side. On cold winter nights, she settled at his feet by the fire. Henry would wink at me over her head, proud and happy, saying she's been a real blessing. Sam. I believed it. Everyone in the village came to love Freya as much as they loved Henry. It was last autumn when I first saw Henry without Freya by his side. I knocked on his door one morning and found the world inside painfully silent. Freya's leash still lay coiled by the back door, and a half-empty water bowl was on the floor. Henry sat at his kitchen table, staring down at the red tea stains on his mug. He whispered, "I'm sorry. She's gone." It was as if the air left the room. Freya had passed in her sleep the night before, quietly and without pain, on the rug by the hearth. Henry had held her fur in his hands as she took her last breath. I helped him bury her under the rowan tree in the back garden, her favorite spot to watch sunrises. The morning light fell gently on the place where we laid her to rest. Henry's grief was immediate and profound. The spark in his eyes that Freya had lit vanished. He hardly spoke for days. One night, I tried to cook him dinner and took him to the Red Lion pub. He barely ate and just stared into the fire. That's when I asked him quietly, "Have you eaten today, Harry?" He replied softly, "I can't hear her barking for breakfast anymore." He looked lost. We pinned one of Freya's squeaky toys on the kitchen wall. Each time Henry looked at it, he would smile sadly. He would tell me how Freya would have loved it. We left things unchanged. Freya's empty bed by the stove, her leash on the rack. Henry said it was all he had left of her. It reminded me of his own words. If anyone understood what it meant to lose someone, it was him. In the weeks that followed, I began to notice small uncanny things. Henry insisted it was only coincidence, but I thought otherwise. Late at night, I'd hear the front door click shut on its own, as if Freya had slipped out to pee and came back. The other day, I saw that Freya's blanket had moved from the armchair to the hearth from one evening to the next, although I thought no one else had entered. The echoes of Freya were everywhere Henry had trained her to be. Henry told me one evening that he heard Freya's faint bark outside his window around midnight. He was brushing his teeth and paused, listening for a moment. A tiny distant wolf drifted through the glass. He said it was so clear it made his heart skip a beat, and then he wept quietly. Another time, when I stepped inside his front porch, I caught Freya's familiar shampoo scent on my coat. The smell filled the small hall. I hadn't washed the coat in weeks. For a moment, I was sure she had nuzzled against me at the door. Henry just watched my face. "She's here," I told him. Everywhere she was. Once, as the sun was setting, Henry pointed into the backfield through the mist and said he thought he saw Freya waiting by the gates. I squinted across the twilight. All I saw was fog. There between these oak trees, he kept saying, I convinced him to come inside into the warm lamplight, but he said softly, "She won't run away now, will she?" Not again. Each time something strange happened, Henry would smile through tears and mutter, "Not you too, you old hound." In those quiet moments, it felt like Frey's spirit was gently letting him know she hadn't forgotten him. The house was less lonely because of those subtle signs, and I think it gave him some comfort to believe she remained nearby. He was not really alone. It wasn't long after that Henry grew slowly weaker. The light in his eyes had dimmed, but I thought it was Freya's memory that kept him going. One crisp November afternoon, I found him on the porch in a light coat, sitting as if waiting for Freya to come in our supper. He smiled when he saw me and nodded. "Just listening," he said softly. We spent that evening drinking tea by the fire. He told me tales of his youth and held Freya's old collar in his hands. Told him to eat something, but he just pushed a biscuit around his plate for a long while. Then he said, "Sam, if I go, I hope I can see Freya again. I hope we can find each other out there." I nodded, choking up, not knowing what to say. One night not long after, he passed quietly in his sleep. The room was still, only the ticking of the clock and the distant church chimes marking time. Henry's face was peaceful, a faint smile on his lips. When I gently moved his hand, Freya's leather collar slipped out from between his fingers. I picked it up and read the name Freya, then buried my face in Henry's coat. It smelled faintly of pine and something soft. Maybe your scent was woven in. Later at the small church under the rowan tree, we laid Henry to rest beside Eliza, and Freya's resting place was only a few steps away. I told the clergyman Henry always kept Freya's toy in his pocket. She carried it with her always. The morning was still ungolden, as if the whole village paused for a moment. I felt warm whispers of breeze and imagined it was Freya nuzzling Henry's cheek. It gave me an odd comfort. Years have passed, but Brentford Spoke still holds them both. I visit the cottage often. Ivy curls over the porch where Henry used to greet me, and the hydrogenous bloom each summer just as brightly as they did then. Sometimes I bring fresh flowers to the rowan tree where they're buried. When I'm near the place where Freya lies, I swear I see a golden light moving under the leaves. Late one spring as dusk fell, I lit a candle by the kitchen window. The night was still. I poured tea into my favorite china cup. Then I heard the faintest scratching at the door, as if someone was begging to be let in for warmth. For a moment my heart leapt. I opened the door and found only the empty lane under the stars. I could have swore I saw a pair of shining eyes vanish into the dark. Brantford Spoke may have kept its quiet ways, but I sometimes feel something else lives there. Something gentle lingers in the air. The way the light shifts at dusk, the way the gate swings with the gentlest breeze. In those small things, I feel their presence. I like to think that somewhere beyond the meadows, Henry and Freya walk together again in peace. In the silence of the Devon nights, I sometimes swear I catch the echo of a soft paw pad on gravel, or the murmur of a kind old voice in the wind.
When this happened, I was in the lower grades of elementary school. Back then, I lived in Matsuyama City, in Ehime Prefecture. Just me and my parents in a small, ordinary apartment. My dad was a regular company employee. My mum was a full-time housewife. Dad always came home late because of work. Most nights, he'd get back after I was already asleep. For me, though, that just meant I got to hog my mum all to myself. Those evenings where it was just the two of us felt like my whole world, and I was weirdly proud of that. My daily routine was always the same. I'd come home from elementary school around late afternoon, eat the dinner Mum had made, and then get into the bath with her. I actually hated baths, but when I was in there with her, it was different. We'd talk about what happened at school that day, stuff about my classmates and teachers, or just sing songs together. When it was like that, I didn't mind the hot water at all. If anything, I looked forward to bath time. Usually we'd get out of the tub at the same time, and she'd towel me off and help me into my pajamas. It was a routine. We repeated every night. But that day there was an anime I really wanted to watch, so I decided to get out first, on my own. Mum told me, "Go on then, but dry yourself properly." And she stayed in the tub a bit longer. Normally she would have done all of that for me, but that night I dragged the towel over my hair and arms myself, pulled on my pajamas with damp hands, and padded out of the bathroom alone. I went into the living room, still feeling the steam on my skin, and picked up the remote. The room was half dark, just the faint light from the kitchen. When I switched the TV on, the screen glowed that familiar bluish grey for a second. The sound of static quietly fizzed out of the speakers. I changed the channel to the time slot where my anime should have been starting. That's when I noticed it. On the screen, sitting there as if it was the most normal thing in the world, was my mum. She should still have been in the bath. We didn't own a video camera back then. There were no recordings of us or anything like that. And of course, my mum wasn't some actress who'd suddenly show up on TV. At first I thought, just someone who looks like her. So I shuffled closer and stared straight at the screen from up close. But no matter how I looked at it, the woman on the screen was my mum. The hairstyle, her face, the way her eyes softened when she smiled, all of it. A weird, prickly kind of unease ran through me. My brain kept saying, "This is strange." But a part of me was just drawn in. The TV mum was sitting somewhere that looked like our living room, only the angle was a bit off, like the camera was where I was standing. She looked straight at me through the glass. And then, as if she'd been there, waiting, the mum in the TV spoke. "Yuta, you're out of the bath already? Did you dry yourself properly?" My name came out of the speaker in exactly the voice I heard every day. My stomach jerked, and I sucked in a breath. But maybe because I was still just a kid, the fear didn't push me away. It made me want to talk back, the same way I always did. "Yeah, I dried off," I replied automatically, right there in front of the glow of the TV. To anyone walking past, I must have looked like a little boy just talking to the screen. But the conversation carried on, one line at a time, like we were facing each other across the table. She asked about school. I answered. She asked about what we'd done in class. I told her about it, the way I always did when we were in the bath. At some point, it hit me. This was literally the continuation of the talk we'd been having in the tub a few minutes before. I don't know when exactly the nerves disappeared. Before I realized it, I was completely wrapped up in the conversation with my mum inside the TV. The longer we talked, the more it felt like nothing was wrong. It was just mum and me, like every other evening. Only this time there was glass and flickering light between us. Maybe because it felt like a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I started asking things I was usually too embarrassed to say out loud. "Mum, do you like me?" I blurted out. "Who do you like more, me or Dad?" The mum on the screen looked straight at me and smiled the way she always did when she was teasing me a little. "I love you very much, Yuta," she said. "I love you just as much as I love your dad." There was no hesitation in her voice. It sounded so normal that my chest tightened, with a strange warmth. I pushed my luck. "Will you stay with me forever?" I asked. "Will you always be with me?" On the other side of the glass, Mum's smile turned even softer, almost like the light on the screen glowed warmer for a second. "Of course," she said. "I'll always be with you." The moment those words left her lips, she vanished. There was no dramatic effect, no distortion. One instant she was there, and in the next, the screen simply cut to the opening of the anime I wanted to watch. Bright colors, theme song, characters running across the screen like nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. It took my mind a few seconds to catch up with what I was seeing. Mum was gone. The living room felt suddenly too big and too quiet, even with the anime's opening song blaring from the speakers. The place on the tatami, where I was standing, felt cold under my bare feet. I started crying, not just sniffling, real crying, full-on sobbing, the kind that makes your throat hurt. My voice bounced off the walls and filled the room, louder than the TV. A moment later, I heard the bathroom door slide open, hard, and Mum rushed out, hair still damp, steam trailing behind her. "What's wrong, Yuta?" she gasped, hurrying over and pulling me into her arms. On the TV behind her, my favorite anime had already started. From an adult's point of view, it probably looked ridiculous. A kid who got his show and still ended up howling his eyes out. She tried to calm me down, patting my back, asking over and over, "What happened? Did you hurt yourself? Did something scare you?" I wanted to tell her. I really did. I wanted to say, "You were in the TV. You were talking. You promised you'd stay with me forever and then you disappeared." But every time I tried to put it into words, the whole thing sounded too strange, even in my own head. I knew, even as a little kid, that if I said it out loud, it would collapse into something that sounded like a dream or a lie. So all that came out of my mouth, over and over, was one thing. "Don't go away," I begged, clutching at her. "Don't disappear from beside me. Don't leave me." I remember how small my hands looked, gripping the fabric of her bathrobe, and how warm her skin was where my face pressed into her. After that night, every time we took a bath together, I tried the same thing again. I'd get out a little earlier than her, hurry through drying off and pulling on my pajamas, and practically run to the living room. I'd turn on the TV, watching the glow crawl across the screen, half excited, half anxious. I must have repeated that routine more times than I can count. But the mum in the TV never appeared again. It was always just normal shows, news, dramas, variety programs, regular noise and color. No one waiting on the other side of the glass. Time did what it always does. I grew up, went on to junior high, high school, university, got a job, became, in the most boring way possible, the kind of company employee my dad used to be. Now I'm in my 40s. I don't live in that apartment in Matsuyama anymore. I'm in a different city, different walls, different TV. The living room is quieter, in a different way now. The kind of quiet you get in a place where kids' footsteps never were. Mum passed away a few years ago. It wasn't anything dramatic. No accident, no crime. Just an illness that slowly took more and more out of her. We had time to talk, time to prepare, time to say the normal kinds of goodbyes that grown-ups say at hospital bedsides. But sometimes, that makes it feel even less real. When I come home late and kick my shoes off, the way Dad used to, the apartment is dark and still. I drop my bag, reach for the remote, and turn the TV on just out of habit, just to have some noise in the room. For a moment, while the screen is still black and the speakers only hum, I catch myself thinking the same stupid hope I had as a kid. Maybe she'll be there. Not the old woman in the hospital bed, the mum from back then, the one with damp hair from the bath, smiling at me through the glass, calling me by name like she'd been waiting. Sometimes I even hear my own voice in my head, the little me, asking the same question. Mum, do you like me? Will you stay with me forever? The TV flickers, the news comes on, or some late night show, or a commercial. Just regular programs. Faces of people I don't know talking about things that don't really matter to me. Every time that happens, there's this tiny, stupid disappointment that pinches inside my chest. I tell myself it's ridiculous. I'm a grown man. I know how televisions work. I know the dead don't just show up on command because you switch a device on. And yet, even now, on nights where I'm tired and the apartment is quiet, I'll sit there on the sofa for a bit, staring at the dark screen before I hit the power button, listening to the faint electrical buzz in the silence. If I wait just a second longer, if I call out her name in my head one more time, if whatever happened that night in Matsuyama wasn't just a child's misremembered dream, but something that reached out through the TV for me, maybe just once the picture will come up wrong. The channel will be off. The angle will be just a little strange. And she'll be there again, like she promised. Smiling the way she did back then. Looking straight through the glass at me and saying in that everyday voice of hers, I told you, didn't I? I'll always be with you.
Hello watchers and listeners. Happy holidays. I hope you enjoyed this year's collection of wholesome and sad ghost stories. I always find it's a nice reminder to love and appreciate who and what you have. A huge thank you to my fellow narrators who really came through for me this year on such short notice. Words cannot express my gratitude. A huge thank you to all the authors of the stories, and especially to those who submitted their own, and also to the narrators who brought their own stories, since I had trouble sourcing enough stories for this year. I'm so proud to be able to work with such great people in such a fantastic community. And of course, the biggest thank you goes to you, the listener. Stay safe this holiday season. And remember,